Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about Todd Gurley being cut by the Los Angeles Rams. Now, I know this may be shocking to many of you, and there was a lot of shock around the fantasy football industry, but as a Los Angeles Rams fan, I saw this from a mile away. And honestly, last week during a live stream, I called it, and I was asking for this to happen. So on today's episode, we're going to talk about the 2020 fantasy football implications of Todd Gurley being cut by the Los Angeles Rams, him signing with his new team, the Atlanta Falcons, where he could potentially be valued going into 2020, who is going to be replacing him in that valuable Rams backfield, and exactly all the implications for this matter. So without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Hey everybody, how's it going? All right, so hope everyone's doing well. Before we begin, just want to remind all of you, again, I do live in LA. I am a Rams fan. So it was tough to see Todd Gurley get cut. You know, this is a running back that has been absolutely fantastic year after year. And for us, a guy like this who has been a Ram his whole career, we signed him to a big deal. We expected big things. The injury was just an unfortunate, scenario that took place. As the years have gone by, Todd Gurley's just been absolutely incredible, but it was a matter of time. It was more of a performance issue rather than, I think a business monetary issue. We signed him for the contract that he deserved. The performances that he put up in 2017 and 2018, they constituted the contract that he got. He was the best running back in the National Football League. He was tearing everyone apart, and he was winning the Rams games single-handedly. So going into 2020, I think the performance of last season, the knee issue, everything of that culminated together. And it's the Rams trying to pretty much collect as much money as they possibly can in order to help their franchise going into the future, because they know, just like anybody else, if your running back isn't going to be able to pull it, just like the Cardinals with David Johnson, you got to get rid of him. Unfortunately, they weren't able to find anywhere to trade him to, but they cut him. They pay him that $7.55 million. They take about $20+ million in dead cap space, which is all a part of the business. It's, the sacrifice you have to be willing to make. Now, here's the thing. As a Rams fan, again, there's two ways of seeing this. It's sad that Gurley's gone, but at the same time, I expect the running game for the Rams in 2020 to be much improved. Like I was mentioning, this is a performance issue rather than anything else. I think Todd Gurley wasn't himself late 2018, especially in the NFL playoffs, and he definitely wasn't himself last season. Sure, we had a couple tidbits of spurts from him that we saw a burst or an extra cut, but otherwise, he was running through holes and immediately falling down. Wasn't able to make a secondary move in order to, evade or elude people in, by linebackers or safeties. By the time you got to the second or third level, this guy was pretty much toast. He was falling down, and that just wasn't efficient enough, especially for how good this Rams offense has been over the last couple of years. So let's talk about Todd Gurley. Let's talk about his fantasy value. And what he's done over the last couple of years, and in terms of what I expect a future running back to fill this backfield can potentially do. Now, like I was mentioning, in 2017 and 2018, he was an absolute monster. Many of us will remember this is a guy that was the number one running back in half PPR in both 2017 and 2018. In 2017, this guy combined for a total of 19 touchdowns, over 2,000 all-purpose yards, 1,300 on the ground, 788 through the air with 64 receptions on 87 targets. He's an absolute monster in 2017. He's tearing apart the league in the fantasy football playoffs, weeks 14, 15, and 16 of your leagues. This was a guy that was averaging 38.37 fantasy points per game in a half PPR basis. He was dominating. He was winning people leagues. I ended up winning a championship in 27 against the Todd Gurley owner in week 16. Bless. It wasn't easy, but Kareem Hunt and Melvin Gordon got me that dub. But regardless, we'll talk about Melvin Gordon later today. In 2017, he was a stud. Going into 2018, all around, he was pretty much consensus number one RB considering the Le'Veon Bell situation, and he performed as that. 1,251 rushing yards, a total of 21 touchdowns, 17 on the ground, 4 through the air. On 81 targets, had 59 receptions for 580 yards and 342.6 fantasy points. Now, he may have had in terms of fantasy points, regression, but he did miss 2 games in 2018 due to injury. This was at the back end of the season. And if you guys remember, sure, he didn't have that fantasy football playoff performance like he did in 2017, but his replacement, CJ Anderson, definitely did. If you guys don't remember, as soon as CJ Anderson came into this backfield in weeks 16, 17, in the first week of the playoffs against the Dallas Cowboys, that was the second week of the playoffs, CJ Anderson was on fire. This guy averaged 23.3 fantasy points in a half-point scoring setting as the starting running back of this backfield, with Gurley taking some time to rest and having limited snaps, especially in the playoffs. So CJ Anderson dominated with 23-plus points, kept on track, and it really didn't feel like there was much of a loss of talent at the running back position for the Los Angeles Rams. So we got into 2019 after the Super Bowl hangover. A lot of questions in the offseason, whether Gurley's healthy, whether he's going to be able to do. And honestly, I'll admit it, and I'll admit it 10 times out of 10. I thought Todd Gurley was going to be perfectly fine. I thought that he would still be just as good. He still scored 14 touchdowns this past season. But unfortunately, everything else diminished. His touchdowns were there, which I expected because the Rams offense is consistently getting down the field and playing in the division they do. It's a lot easier when you play against the Cardinals twice a season and the highest scoring matchups against the Seattle team, going back and forth. But unfortunately, he had a pretty significant drop in rushing attempts. Yards dropped nearly 400 yards from the season prior. Receiving yards dropped about 250 from the season prior. And we ended up seeing this guy finish as the number, I think, 14 overall running back in half PPR with 203.9 points. Now, sure, there were glimpses of still, Gurley being a stud. But at the same time, a lot of it had to do with him scoring touchdowns. If he scored a touchdown, he was great. In the last 3 weeks of the 2019 season, we saw Todd Gurley be a stud. We saw him average 18.47 fantasy points. For those of you who had him in the fantasy playoffs, he was a contributor, and he was fantastic there. But again, when we look at the entire big picture, is he the running back of the future? How many more rushing attempts does he have left in his career? Again, a running back's career in the NFL is the shortest on average at about 3 years. Todd Gurley, is going into his sixth this coming season. So it's a little rough. Now, that also being said, Todd Gurley did miss out on 5 rushing touchdowns. That went over to Malcolm Brown. If those touchdowns go in the opposite direction, we get an extra 30 points here and there, then we have a different conversation. Maybe he stays a part of this team. But again, the lingering issues with that knee that the Rams did not want to make public, that they kept under wraps for as long as they possibly could, that is finally beginning to surface first and foremost. And that's why they kind of got rid of him. Also, they gotta get more pieces. They gotta help their defense out. And if opening up cap space for the coming years is going to make a difference by cutting Todd Gurley, then so be it. But cutting Todd Gurley pretty much opens up a backfield, which in my opinion is the most valuable backfield of this entire free agency period right now. This is a running back that's been touching the ball 300 plus times a season. Obviously not last season considering the injury, but again, he touched the ball 250 times last year with a busted knee. So going into 2020, who exactly is going to be filling his spot? I expect it to be Darrell Henderson. And if you guys remember, we talked about Darrell Henderson last offseason because we were a little worried about what potentially Todd Gurley was going to be able to do. And unfortunately, Todd Gurley wasn't fantastic, but Darrell Henderson didn't get much time either. Now, I went back and I looked at my 2019 rookie breakdown of the top running backs of last season, and I had Darrell Henderson as my number 4 on that list because I did expect him to at least contribute. Now, I went and I looked at my notes, and this is what Darrell Henderson produced in college, and this is what he's capable of doing. Since 1956, Henderson leads all Division I running backs with a minimum of 300 carries and in a career 8.2 yards per carry average. He leads all Division I running backs in the history. 8.2 yard per carry average. In the last 2 seasons at college, this guy averaged 8.9 yards per attempt on the ground. Why? Well, obviously, there's a little bit of a lack of competition in the division, in the area that he was in college football. But at the same time, this guy's a combination of burst and speed all together, wrapped in one. You just have to go watch his highlight film. He's absolutely ridiculous. Since 2014, Henderson had the highest yards after contact per attempt, 6.16 yards average. Also, Henderson, 15.2% of his career carries gained 15 or more yards. 62.9% of his career yardage came off of carries of 15 plus yards. So what does that mean? I'm telling you, if you go turn on the tape of Darrell Henderson, all you see is this dude ripping off 60-yard runs, 70-yard runs, kick returns, a screen pass to the house. It does not matter. He's a big playmaker. He's fresh. The Rams traded up for him last year because they knew they wanted to lock down this talent for the future. They've given him a season to kind of adjust to the National Football League, maybe put on some weight, get more adjusted to the point where he's going to have to catch the ball a bunch out of this backfield because the Rams definitely do like to use a receiving back. So at this point in time, it looks like Darrell Henderson is going to be filling that spot. Now, what kind of value do we see? If there's nobody else drafted or signed into this backfield, Darrell Henderson is automatically, in my opinion, a low-end RB1. I'm not kidding. This might be, a Los Angeles Rams fan just completely spitting off, craziness. But I honestly do believe anybody associated with this backfield at a full healthy level is going to be successful. After this team re-signed Andrew Whitworth, yeah, I get it. He's 37 years old. We'll get over it. And they re-signed Blythe, the offensive guard. They're continuing to bolster up this offensive line. Obviously, they want to trade Brandon Cooks. Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods will be just fine. You don't need anything else. You have Tyler Higbee, Gerald Everett. You'll be fine. You have a running back here that's going to be in line for 10 plus touchdowns, maybe 15 plus touchdowns, at least 250 attempt season on the ground. Through the air, you can get about 30 receptions. It looks like a recipe for success, in my opinion. As long as Henderson can step up to the plate, this is a guy that's going to be taking carries and just running off with them. Now, to close off, again, we have to wait and see what happens with this backfield. Henderson is the automatic guy that we're all pointing to, and we're hoping is going to at least be the successor of a Todd Gurley. But let's talk about Todd Gurley. Let's talk about him going to the Atlanta Falcons. Now, this was signed earlier today. Obviously, if he passes his physical, it'll all go through 1 year, $5 million deal. The Atlanta Falcons, in my opinion, are cutting an injured running back by the name of Devontae Freeman, and they're signing an injured running back. They're inheriting damaged goods. There's a reason why no one wanted to trade for Todd Gurley, and there's a reason why we had to cut him, because nobody wanted that contract, especially at what they could potentially be getting, and no one really wanted to test it, because at this moment in time, everyone knows that he's damaged goods. Sure, he'll be going back to Georgia. This is a guy that played for the University of Georgia. But the thing is, are we going to see the Todd Gurley of 2018, 2017, or are we going to get more 2019, maybe even some regression from there, considering this offense has never really been, as of late, we're going to smash mouth, run it down your throat. This is an offense that, as of late, has been, we're going to throw the ball a bunch out of the backfield. Sure, Ito Smith, Brian Hill can be out there, but they're not going to be able to do anything. It'll be Gurley all day, and it'll be up to Gurley whether or not he can end up gaining some yards, scoring touchdowns. I guarantee you he's not going to be seeing a 14 touchdown season. And because of that, he pretty much is, a low-end RB2, maybe an RB3 this coming season if he is not looking at his healthiest. Now, sure, we've seen the Atlanta Falcons, especially last season at the back end. I don't want to discredit them because they really did perform well. After they, fired everyone in terms of defensively, and they kind of changed their culture midway through a season, which you never see in the National Football League. After, Dan Quinn was on the chopping block in terms of almost being fired, we saw this team come back and in the last 8 games of the season, absolutely dominate. Specifically, I think if I'm not mistaken, they lost to the Los Angeles Rams 37-10. In that game, Todd Gurley played well. After that, they went on a bye week. They readjusted everything. And in the last 8 games of the season, they won 6 of their games, beating the San Francisco 49ers once and also beating the New Orleans Saints. The only teams that they lost to in this time was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because Matt Ryan could not play offense. He was throwing 50% and just complete garbage. And they lost against New Orleans on Thanksgiving. Only lost by 8 points thanks to Younghoe Koo and those incredible onside kicks that he is capable of doing. That's always exciting. But regardless, this is a team that in the back end of the season really turned it around. This offseason, They're adding more defensive pieces. Obviously, I heard some rumors that they might be looking to trade Julio Jones for Zach Ertz. I don't know what's going to end a pick. I don't know what's happening. But the way it looks, this team is going in the right direction. Sure, the NFC South is as competitive as it's ever been now that Brady's down there. But I do believe this is a division where Gurley could potentially succeed. And I want him to succeed. But when I look at this division, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are one of the best run-stopping defenses in the National Football League. If you don't remember, so are the New Orleans Saints. Plain and simple. Those are the two teams that I was afraid of weekly last season of playing my potential running back against them because they were so damn good at stopping the run. If I could go potentially find the numbers right now, because I didn't expect to bring up that point, but this is some improv stuff here. Let's go find running backs. Oops, excuse me. There it is. Here we go. So last season, in a half-point PPR basis, the best teams at stopping the run, okay? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were the second best team in stopping the run, only giving up 13.9 points per game to opposing running backs in a half PPR setting. The New Orleans Saints were the fifth best at that, stopping them and only allowing 17 points to opposing running backs on average. Sure, the Carolina Panthers gave up the most points to opposing running backs on the ground, but okay, Todd Gurley will have 2 good games against the Carolina Panthers. Perfectly fine. He'll be great there. Devontae Freeman had good games against them. Gurley could definitely do it. But against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, against the New Orleans Saints, it is going to be tough. He's going to have to get involved in the passing game, which is going to require him to run a lot more routes than he did last season. He's going to run probably maybe double those, the amount of routes that he did in 2019. So that's going to be asking a lot of him, but hopefully he does well. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Todd Gurley being caught by the Los Angeles Rams. To be honest, it's only a matter of time until we figure out exactly how everything pans out, but I'm excited about Darrell Henderson. I'm excited about the new potential of this Los Angeles Rams team. I'm sad that Todd Gurley's gone. He contributed a lot. He was a fantasy stud. He helped this team get to where they are right now. But all in all, I'm excited to see what happens. I'm excited to see what he could potentially do in Atlanta. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Until next time, I appreciate you guys spending your time here today. And we will probably cover we're definitely talking about Melvin Gordon in another video, so go check that out. But outside of that, Monday, considering I live in Los Angeles and the coronavirus is taking over the world, I will, no one has a job practically unless you if you work in an industry that is essential. So basically food and that kind of service, not the case for me. So I will be here. I will be live streaming probably every day next week. I will update you on the schedule when it comes down. So come check me out next week and we'll talk fantasy. Until then, we'll see you guys. Smiley face.